This is Dan Schneider. This is another Arts and Life. Liam Cooper will be interviewing me again. We tried a few months ago and we had an aborted session after about 30 minutes or so. So, starting afresh, thanks for your continued interest, Liam. Let's talk, whatever you want to talk about.
Well, you can't win them all, Dan. Try as we might. I was going through some of the Cosmoetica archives. I think what attracted me the most was your recent novel, perhaps your most recent novel, uh, on Ox Baker,
Huh?
professional wrestler.
Actually, it's two novels ago, and I'm working on another one. But
You can't ever keep up with Dan Schneider when it comes
but
to.
yeah, I did. It's a joint. It's a two-star wrestlers. George the Animal Steel and then Ox Baker, both two of the more wild wrestlers of the '60s and '70s.
Yeah. Well, I know who Ox. I think it's Baker,
Yeah,
not Barker, right?
yeah, Baker.
I know who Ox Baker is. The folks at home might not know who Ox Baker is. You're the professional storyteller here. Would you mind giving them a quick background?
Well,
And I'll ask you some
Ox Baker
questions.
was one of the many of dozens of hulking, bald, slightly overweight wrestlers from the '60s and '70s. This was long before Jesse the Body Ventura or
Yeah,
Hulk Hogan or superstar Billy Graham made basically
right.
Schwarzenegger like figures dominate wrestling. He had mutton chops. He had evil eyebrows that twisted up, and he called himself he was one of two wrestlers that were infamous for the quote unquote heart punch. The originator was a fellow named Stan the Man Stasiak, and Baker then, who didn't work for the WWF at any time, which was the wrestling promotion that I was familiar with in New York City.
Mm,
Uh,
mm.
he basically ripped that off, but he
Yeah,
was quite a
yeah,
character in that. I believe I start off that novel with an infamous riot that happened in Cleveland. You could call it a race riot because
yeah.
his opponent, the guy he ended up assaulting. I'm not sure off the top of my head again whether he was I think he was scheduled with another wrestler to wrestle Ernie Ladd, who was a former uh, National Football League football player here in America, and
Huge
he may
star.
have been even a Hall of Famer. I'm not certain, but Ernie Ladd was a Hall of Fame wrestler, and they went so over the top. These were the days when people actually, most of them believed that wrestling was
Yeah,
a real sport, that they thought it was a damn near lynching. And you can
yeah,
see grainy black and white footage of the wrestlers fleeing from people throwing chairs, taking punches. Baker himself even was cut with a few sharp objects, and it goes on from there. And the other wrestler I mentioned, George the Animal Steel, some people might know from the WWE in his later years where he used to chew turnbuckles and he paint his tongue green. And he was actually a very intelligent guy, had, I think, several master's degrees, was a high school gym teacher, and would make extra money being this weirdo. And he was a great moneymaker, although he never held a quote unquote title belt. Neither did Ox Baker, for that matter, I believe.
and you raise a lot of good points. One is that some of the most barbaric of professional wrestlers were some of the most astute and intelligent men that you might come across. George the Animal Steel was also a part-time actor. He was in
Yeah,
the movie
Ed
Ed
Wood.
Wood.
Yeah. He
Yes, where
played Tor Johnson because he looked quite a bit like him. Again, an overweight, bald wrestler.
yeah.
So,
And you kind of bury the lead a bit, but the Ox Baker was famous for his heart punch, but he was famous because he allegedly killed a man
yeah.
by the name of
Actually, two.
actually two. So when him and Ernie Ladd fought, he had already established his persona as a guy that might kill you.
Yeah.
So at the end of their match, Ox Baker proceeds to give his finishing move, the heart punch, and then again, and then again. And by the third or fourth time, the crowd has lost its mind. It cannot, it's, as you say, it's like they were watching a lynching and they rushed the ring attempting to save Ernie the Cat Lad, professional football star. So I was.
And it's easy to note that it was held in a mostly black section of Cleveland, and probably a third to half the fans were black, which was a rarity in those days. But they came because Ernie Ladd drew black crowds.
Huge star. And the strange thing is, starting a riot was kind of part of the job description if you were a wrestler back in the day. That meant you were really good at what you were doing, which is getting the business over, getting people to come and see the event.
Getting the heat, they called it.
Got to get the heat. So I was curious where you came across the Ox Baker story. It sounds like you grew up watching the old school WWF during the territory days when it was Vince McMahon Sr. running the New York territory.
Yeah. Well, I grew up watching the WWF with Bruno Sammartino when I was a little boy. Bruno Sammartino was born in Italy during the Mussolini years, and he became after Joe DiMaggio in the 40s and 50s. By the 1960s, Italian Americans were looking for another face, and for about 15 years, he was a god. I mean, here in New York, he would outdraw Muhammad Ali when he came to town, because when he fought, he sold out. I think Sammartino sold out the Madison Square Garden in about 200 shows, something like 160 times, which meant he was a moneymaker, which meant that's why they gave him the belt, because Sammartino could do no wrong. Now, as I said, also in the WWF on and off was people like Andre the Giant, but more specifically, George the Animal Steele came in and out. But in thinking about doing it, because I did an earlier book on wrestling about Gorgeous George in the 40s and 50s.
Yes.
And I'm going to, at some point, do a book on probably Superstar Billy Graham. So in the middle, I was thinking, who could I do? If I do Superstar Billy Graham, maybe I would do a later wrestler, but I don't want to do a wrestler that's in the Vince McMahon Jr. era for fear of somehow getting sued for something. So if I'm going to do Superstar Billy Graham as my end book, which would be 79, 80 or so, I needed another thing. And then I came across just as I'm doing my notes, writing stuff, ideas for different things, plotting things, what I got to do the next week or whatnot, I have in the background. And this is one of the things YouTube is really good at. You get all kinds of wacky things. This is why I rarely subscribe to things, because it just reinforces your own biases. But this came up, and I saw the Ox Baker riot, and I was like, I remember hearing about that. So I looked it up and I said, this would be good. But neither Ox Baker nor George the Animal Steele were in and of themselves compelling enough figures. So while they knew each other, in my book, I make them a little bit more cross paths, a little bit more, which has them going into different territories, contrasting their lives here and there. As I said, Ox Baker also appeared in a film with Kurt Russell. He also had you can look it up online. He appeared on The Price is Right in, I think, 1982.
Yes. That's right.
And it's a pretty funny segment when I think he wins actually and goes up to spin the wheel or whatever they do there.
Come on down.
But and it became. There are scenes of them in their private lives with their family, and it's a way to just sort of portray the 1970s in a non-Brady Bunch sort of manner, giving a bit wider berth, because both of these guys appeal to what would now be considered MAGA types. But this was also when pro wrestling like that, there was a genuineness to it. These guys, they didn't let the public see what was really happening. That it was all what they call kayfabe, so it was just it was a way for me to just sort of have an interesting book about a certain period and time and whatnot. I guess if I was writing a few thousand years ago, I might have been writing about the Colosseum and Roman gladiators. But
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, this is kind of a little bit of insider baseball. I'm kind of obsessed with wrestling too, but it's really hard to explain to people because when you say, "Oh, I'm a fan of wrestling," they assume that I sit down and I watch people fight and jump around, and I actually spend more time, as you say, like watching weird news broadcasts of a widow of a 70s wrestler. I'm more interested in the characters and the backstories, and it can be hard to get those dynamics across. It's funny that you mentioned, this is why I was curious. I was like, Ox Baker is kind of an interesting choice, as well as George Amel Steele. And you go, well, it's because neither of them really had that je ne sais quoi. And it's funny you mention this because there's a wrestler who is a mix between both of these individuals by the name of Bruiser Brody.
Oh,
Have you heard of it?
Yeah, of
and
course.
I was reading this story. I was
And
like,
Dick
oh,
the Bruiser. And Dick the Bruiser,
because
too.
he was murdered in Puerto Rico, and I was like, that's a much more almost, ancient Greece kind of tragedy.
Yeah, but you
Bruiser
have to
Brody.
remember, I've done a lot of books about gangster types and whatnot. I didn't want to I wanted to get away from that. The next book that I did after
That's
that
true.
is called The Man, which is more of a character-driven thing. What I'm doing now is a book going to be called St. James, which is about teenagers growing up on Long Island. And just to give you an example, just a couple of days ago, up came the song Whip It by Devo. And so I started listening to some Devo songs, which is right in the time era that this is set in, which is the late 70s. So I'm going to probably have a scene where some of the characters are debating new wave music versus Led Zeppelin and that kind of thing and talking about Devo. And actually they had a lot of good pop rock songs, new wave songs, much better than a lot of other bands that are considered higher up. And it's a shame that the band Devo is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because they were singular.
And I mean, you want to talk about, they may have in fact invented new wave.
Yeah.
All the kind of angular, jagged, almost.
If you listen to a lot of the Talking Heads stuff, it's probably about 50% of the way to where Devo was. But Devo was constantly on the forefront. They were the vanguard.
And Devo inspired by the Kent State Massacre.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they think of Devo, they think of Whip It, they think of it's almost a novelty act, but really at the core of Devo is a very astute critique of the death of the American dream that you see all throughout the 70s when you have people like Hunter S. Thompson writing about, the wave of the 60s started to pull back, and what was left was this pop culture detritus that people were kind of trying to figure out how do we move forward, and you see groups like Devo and also kind of the origin of hip-hop around the same time.
And I'll take Devo over the Ramones or any just plain old punk rock bands because there's a literate nature that they had.
Yeah.
More so than, again, like the B-52s or Talking Heads.
Right.
They remind me almost sort of like THX 1138, the first Lucas film. They, though, stuck to their guns artistically, whereas Lucas sold out.
Yeah. Well, and you want to talk about sticking to your guns. Devo has been wearing the power hats for almost 50 years now, and there's no end in sight. They almost remind me of the Situationalists, the kind of French group, because they were always doing kind of making their television appearances something of an event, kind of in the Andy Kaufman style.
Yeah.
The 70s are a very interesting time because you get the mix of the biggest pop culture events of all time. You get the Led Zeppelins, but then you also get this origins of this subversive post-hippiness that doesn't quite ascribe to the Grateful Dead, but it also doesn't like Led Zeppelin. So what do? You go to Devo. That's what happens. You mentioned a bit of your compositional process, working on notes and such. Do you think this is a very broad question, but do you tend to focus on eras? It sounds like you're in your 70s mood right now.
No, I mean it just sort of comes to me. Like I said, before I did the wrestling book, I did a book on a fictional ancestor of the poet James Emmanuel.
Mhm.
The character I called Emmanuel, and it was called Exodus. And what I've done is I saved once I got the first draft of the Exodus book that I finished, which I'm going to be calling Exodus Pair, meaning the parent. Uh, I'm gonna rewrite the book probably after I finish this long book, which will
Mhm.
probably take me till maybe October, September, October. Then I'm gonna go back and rewrite the Exodus. I'm gonna call it Exodus Fils or Fils in French, meaning the child. And they'll have been written about 2.5 to 3 years apart. And
Mhm.
so I want to compare because one of the things that I really am grateful of is once I'm done with something, boom, I drop it. And
Yeah.
so it's like, I'm trying to remember when I was talking to you about this book called The Man. I'm thinking like, what the hell was that about again? I don't even
Who was
remember.
in that book? Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, and then just to see where I go and which version I prefer, or do I bring in new characters? Because I will have forgotten literally ninety nine
Mm.
point five
Mm.
percent of it, um, and and that's a good thing because it means I've got to constantly reinvent. And if you were to look and read all of my books when I started writing prose, my very first prose book in 2004, which was, well, my first four was True Life. After that, in
Gotcha.
2005, I did started with the fiction. And you look now, 21 years later, I mean, I've gone through probably 6 or 7 different eras of maybe
Yeah.
2, 3 years.
Yeah.
But they all sort of slowly shift. I did initially, my second or third era was what I would call my total immersion era, which were these big
Yeah.
books like the Vincetti brothers and a Norwegian in the
No,
family,
we
and then my
didn't.
spy book
Yeah.
and what. Then now after I did a couple of big novels, I'm pulling back and trying to do smaller stuff. My plays I'm trying to do smaller because I was doing a lot of plays that would be 3 or 4 hour plays, which in terms of production, if you're a big name, people will come to see it.
Yeah.
But wanting to do smaller plays that could be introductory plays and that kind of thing. I'm gonna in the next couple of years write a play on camera for Alex Sherimet and Joel
Mhm.
Parrish because I told them they Alex wanted to do a biographical thing, and I'm like, that's good. You can do that anytime, whether I'm dead or not. But while I'm still living,
Yeah.
breathing, and in my prime, you have
Right.
got to film me actually right. If it takes 22, 24, 30 hours, you got that. You can condense that down to a 2 hour play, and I've got ideas. Alex has some other ideas. He wants to like do them both together. I said that's never going to work. You'd be sabotaging yourself. But think about how revolutionary it is if you do a documentary on an artist creating the art,
Yeah.
not just 5 6 minutes out of a 90-minute film, but all but the 5 or 6 minutes in a 90-minute film where I'm talking about the characters and how and why do it, and they've got a thing called Tella where it's a computer program where you can type and it'll come up in a video so that you can see me actually typing whether I'm making mistakes or not, and then how I can, and because like when I've been doing sections for this current novel I'm in, I mean I found that one of the things is I want to type very quickly. So I get an idea and boom, and I just sort of let my mind go where it's going to
Yeah.
go rather than govern it. Now, as I go back and do a second and third and fourth and fifth draft, I will be editing as I go along. But to see that process, it shows that I'm not superhuman, that creativity in itself is not superhuman. It takes great skill. It's greatness, but it's not superhuman. I'm not saying everyone can do it. The vast majority of people can't do it. But for those who can see something in this documentary that's done of me doing this, they'll be able to say, well, that's very interesting because you're not going to no one's you can't ever see how Whitman or Stevens
Mhm.
or Boccaccio or Cervantes did their creative processes. to actually show someone and be able to say, oh, here's that play that he wrote, just like I did 25 years ago. I wrote a poem on camera in 100 minutes. That's something that that I think is invaluable, especially now in this AI age. Can you imagine 2 or 3 years from now, large language models have crashed, the economy is recovering, and here comes along an old guy from New York who's saying he's the best writer that ever was, and is showing you and showing this is what human being can do, better than a machine still. Maybe it'll only last 50 years before they actually get something, but it'll show. I think it's something that would inspire people much more than just seeing, oh, when Dan was a kid, he worked for gangsters and he was in a gang, and then he spent 40 years as a corporate drone.
Right. Well, and so I'm curious, do you think about your career systematically like this? Do you think now is going to be, I'm going to make this movement to writing in this new style, or it happened just as a natural shift?
Whatever hits me. I'm the ultimate utilitarian. This isn't to say that I don't plan. For example, this book that I'm doing about these kids on Long Island, just to give you another example, I recently watched, because I wanted to do a show on the old 1970s cartoon, Land of the Lost. I watched this television series called James at 15, James at 16 with Lance Kerwin in the 70s, one of these great family shows. I watched a dozen or so episodes of the show Family with Christy McNichol, which was a great family drama. And what I'm doing is I'm freely taking some of their ideas, like, grandma comes to visit and has cancer, and I'll do it in maybe a 500-word short section poetically. Then I'll have maybe a 3,000-word chapter about a main character lusting for some girl or something, or something happens at the high school, or someone dies in an accident. These small things that would never make it into the more typically Hollywood dramatic stuff that I had in Vincetti Brothers or Norwegian the Fan, where you have murder and people scheming and spies and stuff. Here you have just basically a bunch of kids. I did a book about 5 years ago called Center of Mass, which was about 12, 15 people after World War II and over 30 or 40 years, how they adjusted to life after the war. This is the teen or preteen to teen version of that, where I'm going to be over 6-7 year period, follow these kids in their lives, and most of them are going to go nowhere. The narrators are going to be unnamed, but there is one kid who I'm calling James Taylor, not like the singer, but he's going to be known as Saint James. And he's not the narrator, but he will be the main character other than the narrator.
Interesting. So you know where you're going, and you have the skills, the requisite skills to actually accomplish what you're planning. How far in advance do you tend to plan?
Well, it all depends. Like, for example, sometimes the Vincetti Brothers is a good example. I wanted to write about these 3 real brothers that I knew in the early 90s, but this was before I even became a great poet. But it didn't seem to work in my mind to do poems about them. I could do Nat Turner's mind. I could do poems about some big scientific figures. But once I got to about 2011, and I'd written a few great novels that weren't super large, that came to me. I said, this is the medium. I watched Rocco and His Brothers, a great Italian film by Luchino Visconti. And that gave me the idea, because it's about 3 brothers too. I can go in this direction. I took some scenes from it, mixed things up, and I had that. That took 20 years. Sometimes what I have, for example, I didn't even have a thought about doing a second version of Exodus. Originally, I wanted to do a big sweeping novel, sort of like of Black life after Reconstruction, and I was gonna think this is gonna be something like Roots by Alex Haley. Right. But as I got to writing it, I'm like, I've done so many big novels. I want to do something smaller. So I shrunk that down. Then I had in my mind to always do a novel to a first draft, do it, and then come back and do a second version of it. I didn't plan it for Exodus though. I thought of maybe
Gotcha.
some other novel. But then once I saw this was a small enough novel, I thought it has to be a small novel that I redo, something only maybe 100,000 words or less, not a big sprawling novel because it's going to diverge so much. And then other novels come to you. I wanted to do a book called the Grand and the Glorious, which was the final novels of the Maravelli crime family, and I just love the title, and so I had to fit the book to the title. Sometimes, for example, when I do a book, sometimes I ended up the last couple of novels. I ended up with the last line being something that a character had said, or being a subtitle of a novel. So there are all kinds of things, and sometimes you have to impose something on a book, and then see, it's sort of like if you were to, in a superhero comic, punch a hole through Jupiter or something. How would the colors flow out and change or whatnot? Other times you have to let it come to you. You have to know when to let it come to you and when to take control. It's sort of like being in bumper cars. You're going back and forth, and boom, am I going to go forward? Whatever.
Now, you mentioned that you have a pretty useful talent. First of all, I would say that, I'm personally interested in seeing this Exodus project because I think you're one of the few writers that actually, most people say, oh, yeah, I'm going to write a novel. It'll be out in 15 years. Well, with Dan Schneider, you can actually get some sort of turnaround to see how these two works can create a dialogue with one another. But you mentioned that you have the skill of being able to drop something once you finish writing it. I was curious if you have the ability to, tunnel vision when you're working on a project. It sounds like you have various ideas. Are you able to kind of catalog what you're thinking about and not allow, oh, maybe I want to work on, a Norwegian in the family, but I'm working on Vicenzi Brothers or vice versa, and not allowing whatever the Norwegian elements infiltrate into your other work?
No, the Norwegian came from the fact that the character of the Norwegian and the character of Big Frank are mentioned in single chapters in the Vicenzi Brothers, and I said I had to expand both of these characters. They're too goddamn good. But when I'm writing something, it's total focus. I can focus my energy. Like I said, sometimes when I'm just going like this, it's almost like I'm in one of those commercials where you see a cat typing and just going, and I've just got that tunnel vision, and that's it. And I'm going to bring it to a focus. And I'm not gonna cheat on the book and put it aside. Now maybe when I'm 80, I'll have to do that. My mind won't be as fresh or whatnot, but hopefully all of this creativity helps keep my mind fresh. But no, you focus on it, and it's really an extension of my own personality because my wife, for example, is the opposite of me in that, like, she never forgets things. Like if someone screws her over, she never forgets.
Yeah, right.
Whereas with me, I've been screwed over so many times by individuals, by corporations and jobs that I worked at. I mean, I'm to a point where I'm going to be 62 next February. I'm going to have to probably work at least 5, maybe till I'm 70, so that Jessica and I have enough saved away, because I don't trust the fucking asshole Trump is going to fuck up the economy, lose $1 trillion in 5 minutes like he did there. But hopefully after that I'll still be in good enough shape. I'm in pretty good shape here. I mean, I'm only like in my mid 170s. I'm 6 foot, so I'm not. I don't have a big beer gut. I'm not, wheezing my way to the end of existence in my 60s. I think I can reasonably, because I have ancestors that live to their mid to late 80s on my natural birth mother's side, and that's generally the predictor. I figure with modern medicine, I can probably squeeze another 5 to 10 years and live to my mid 90s minimum, if I avoid stuff and I eat healthy. Jessica, her mother was a nutritionist, a dietitian, so I'm always eating good stuff. So,
well, how about stressors? How's work been?
If I could blow up the fucking whole capitalist system, I would. I'll just leave it generally at that. Like I said, I'm 61. I work with a guy who's 69. At 130 years old, he and I do the hardest, most physical labor in the goddamn store where I work. Whereas young kids who are in the fucking meat department, sit around and are on their cell phones the whole time. And
like me.
and and the management doesn't do anything about it. They don't give a shit. I mean, I'm off next Tuesday or next Wednesday. Starting off, I have 9 straight days off. So I'm going to do 4 or 5 interviews. I'm gonna probably try to do about 4,000 or 5,000 words a day on this book, setting things up for my second draft. And so, like today, I got up today. I went shopping because this was my only day off till the next week. Then I came, I did a couple of 1,000 words on the book. Then I mowed the lawn outside. I did a few other tasks outside. I went to another store. I had to pick up a couple of things. I came back. I did another couple of 1,000 words. Jessica and I went out for lunch. I came back, did some more writing, and then I spent a couple of hours just relaxing, watching videos for whatever might come up, and then I have you scheduled. So that's on my day off.
It's the hardest working man in show business, the white James Brown, Dan Schneider. Well, we could talk about the man. The man seemed a bit more, putting the cosmic in Cosmoetica, a bit more metaphysical, maybe a little like theoretical as it approached the almost ontology and the ways of being, the way that like consciousness comes into existence, consciousness as a character itself. Maybe I'm misconstruing what I've read. I don't know. Where did the man come from?
Now I'm going to again. I've totally dropped it. And
yeah, well, this is true. This is also
so what
true.
because the titles. So this is the book where I wrote what was the main thesis? The character that'll come back to me once you mention it.
Oh, I can't look it up right now, but yeah, it's it was the. We might have to just skip past this.
No,
one.
let me look it up here. Hold on. So the man. This was my book about. I used a number of interesting things. Fantastic Planet came to mind.
Yes.
Woody Allen's Sleeper. Stranger in a Strange Land.
Oh.
This is about a character that is supposedly we don't know why he was found on a ship that crashed on a comet, and he's found by the authorities as they. This is in a sense a prequel to my first science fiction book, The Edge of the Shown. Well, it may be a slightly different universe too, sort of like Star Trek and the evil Star Trek mirror universe, they call it.
Yeah.
So this character apparently was ripped away from his life as a writer. No one knows who he is, but members of the Galactic Union are looking to Earth to join their federation, their League of Star Empires or whatever it might be, and it turns out that some of these Galactic Union people are fans of the Millennial Poet, who people don't know that the man is the Millennial Poet. That the man, we don't even know what his real name is until 2/3 of the way through the book, and he hides his identity. And it's also come to think of it, it's also a play. I think I mentioned The Prisoner. And those kinds of things is because there's this constant dodging, and this is where you have artificial intelligent robots and cyborgs and they're natural human beings, and it's a dystopia that they live in, but it's one of these kinds of Star Trek like friendly dystopias, and. Yeah, it's a way, and I list about the 10 or 12 different works that most influenced the book. So it's
Buck Rogers, yeah.
Buck Rogers is another one, and Buck Rogers is maybe the original Stranger in a Strange Land, and it's a much better book if you've ever read it. it's a much better book than is given credit for. People look at it and they think of the old movie serials with bad special effects, although
Right.
they're more endearing, or they look to the old comic strips. But the actual initial book was actually pretty good.
I've found that to be the case for a lot of science fiction. I'm personally disinclined to it as a genre. I don't really like genre fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, what have you.
Neither
But
do
then
I.
some of them. I mean, for example, you cited Heinlein. There's some of these writers that, judging a book by its cover, you see the Martians and the damsel in distress situation. It kind of seems like a bit like a Pulp Fiction meets Aliens, but underneath the surface, you see a lot of interesting, I don't know, interesting concepts going on, because it's hard to depict. I mean, this is not the most unique observation, but it can be difficult to really approach certain issues without, resorting to robots. Like, how do you describe how a human being is if you don't present some humanoid adjacent being that isn't quite human, but enables us to see what makes us human in the
Well,
kind of
I think
Philip
you
K. Dick
avoid
situation?
that by putting too much by not putting too much emphasis on the technology. For example, I've done basically 4 sci-fi novels, and they're all variations of a sort. The first one, The Edge of the Shown, is in a sense sort of like a space opera, but the main character that ends up there gets these sort of superpowers, and does something and screws things up, and he's in an existential crisis by the time that ends. Then I did a book called what was it? Not the system. I did my second sci-fi book was about a character that is on a planet, also gains some powers, but he's on a planet with children and women, and how he deals with that is something of interest to me. And then I did a book called The System, which was a variation on that. Again, on Planet of the Apes is also mentioned as influencing this latest one. And in this one, the character, the millennial poet, doesn't have these sort of godlike powers that you would have in The Edge of the Shown, which subtitle is The Superhero. But he has a fascination, and he's a mysterious character that has power over other people, including some of the Galactic Union representatives who are coming to Earth. And so these books are science fiction uses backdrop to talk about sort of power dynamics between men and women, between different types of people, between different types of intelligences, and how that ultimately plays out. And I think the best science fiction is really not about the science. It's more about the fiction. Something like Cube, the original movie, low budget, was a good film. All of the sequels then get watered down, and so you have to sort of constantly be shifting focus. Now I don't know if I don't on my horizon have another sci-fi kind of thing in the works. Like I said, I'll probably do a Superstar Billy Graham novel at some point. Once I finish this book and then do Exodus, the second one, I will probably do a number of plays, because I want to finish this 4-cycle play that I call the Tetramal, which is about 4 evil people that I knew, and I don't share that with any people. I don't put it online. One of them is about the last one I need to do is about this pedophile who got away scot-free because his brother was a crooked cop. And
Fascinating.
And anyway, so you want to have a broad palette.
I see.
You don't just want to write about your own frustrations. You don't just want to write about science fiction. I for example, I saw this couple of terrible YouTube videos about Wallace Stevens' poem, "The Emperor of Ice Cream," that totally fucking butchered what it's about. They're making it seem as though this is some grand meditation on death. It's one of the funniest fucking poems that Wallace Stevens read. So I said to Alex Shermet, maybe in the next week or two, when I'm off, we'll do maybe it's just a 30 or 40-minute thing about the utter misinterpretation, because these fucking, a guy named Dana Gioia, you've heard of Dana Gioia, right?
Yes.
A fucking moron. Dana Gioia does a 45-minute video basically talking about how this is such a solemn play, solemn poem, play on words, and it's really, that's because he doesn't understand a number of the phrases are gutter slang about carnivals, the boardwalk, the kinds of geeks and goons that you would see in 1920s Atlantic City or the boardwalk in Brooklyn, because that's where Wallace Stevens hung out. People think Wallace Stevens was just up in Connecticut as a rich executive at Hartford Insurance, but he was very well tied into the low culture of the day, and he made fun of it. You know, called the roller of big cigars the emperor of ice cream. These are talking about certain types of people who were con men on the boardwalk, who would con people. There's one or two phrases that can be misinterpreted to make it seem as though this is a dour poem about an old lady who's died. But if you look at the whole entirety, he's using 1920s New York slang, and fucking assholes like Dana Gioia don't understand this. And this is a guy who was, I think he was the poet laureate for 2 or 4 years or whatever he was. Anyway.
Also a critic of jazz. Emperor of Ice Cream always read to me with this kind of carnival barker rhetoric.
Exactly.
And then you hear the interpretations and you go, well, don't you know that at funerals everybody was eating ice cream, and so the Emperor of Ice Cream is really death. And it kind of, in a weird way, it sums up what's weird about Wallace Stevens, is that not only is it easy to misinterpret him, it's what always attracted me about Stevens and Crane was how they're moving away from meaning itself. It seems like some of these poems, they're not trying to, it's art for art's sake, and they're not trying to have these grand meditations or themes. A lot of it seems to come down to just the color of the language, and I have my own pet theory, because if you read Stevens, peacocks are always showing up in Stevens in one way or another, and I always felt that this was like peacocks crying in the night. These really kind of mesmerizing, effulgent images.
Stevens, in these short poems like The Jar in Tennessee, and
The Dominion,
and Emperor of Ice Cream, and these ones that are under a page and are mostly free verse, they are very Fellini-like. I mean, they really are. Yeah, you mentioned about the odd animals, peacocks and things that show up.
Right.
Emperor of Ice Cream talks about fantails, which are sewn onto a sheet. But if you look, for example, at silent films, it talks about horny feet. Well, one of the things that in the 1920s, if you want to see, if you look at the sweet white innocent girl. That the heroes of like Harold Lloyd or Charlie Chaplin, or even more serious actors, when serious characters that were portrayed by serious dramatic actors went after the girls who were always portrayed, in like bare feet, and they would be wearing what to us aren't skimpy, but then were considered skimpy outfits. And when they talk about, for example, I think it's their horned feet, people who look at this poem very seriously are talking about, it's the feet of a dead woman. But it's describing, if you ever saw, like, here you see the angelic Clara Bow, but then you see, for example, a shot of her naked feet, and one of the feet is like on top of the other, sort of rubbing like that, which is an invitation to the hero that this girl, is hot for you. That's what he means. The word horny goes back to the 1850s or so, the mid-19th century. It wasn't just invented, in the 1950s, long after Stevens was in his prime. And so he's talking about this. This is about a horny girl looking at the roll of big cigars, the guy who makes the ice cream, with concupiscent curds.
Concupiscent curds. I think that in itself.
Yeah.
How many concupiscent funerals have you been to?
Yeah.
Not many.
But this is again a phrase that is meant to contradict, because ice cream doesn't have curds. Cottage cheese has curds, but
Yes,
ice cream
right.
doesn't have curds. So when he's talking about concupiscent curds, he's talking about some kind of fantasy that's going on in the presumably, it
Yeah,
seems,
it's
a female mind.
milky. Yeah,
You know,
right.
called the roller of big cigars. Well, if you've ever seen a tobacconist, they're often these tiny little foreign men who are rolling the big cigars. They're not big muscular guys. So this is Stevens again going. It's sort of like playing what's
An
it called?
accordion.
What's the thing that
Concertina?
or a squeeze box? Yeah,
Squeeze bag.
yeah, and playing this game with words, and these people get so balled up they see one or two words that could be read as death, so therefore it must be a death poem, rather than being a funny poem about a probably what a girl, maybe with someone else, walking along the boardwalk, or walking into a flea market, or walking along Atlantic City's boardwalk or something, and having these thoughts about these weird men that are rolling cigars, someone churning
Yes.
the ice cream, and all of these kinds of things, and it just and then I saw an even worse video than the Dana Joy one, and I was like, Alex, I got to do this. I just want to fucking rip someone a new asshole. I'm not in the mood for this shit. Stop it, Petula.
Well,
Look at
and
this wicked girl.
And I think it all plays together, because I think, as you mentioned, Wallace Stevens was an insurance salesman, and I've watched documentaries on Wallace Stevens, and everybody who knew Wallace Stevens was almost intimidated by him. He was this, because he's like the vice president of whatever.
And he's 6'4", 250, 260 pounds in an era when that's like a 330-pound lineman in the NFL today.
He's like Ernie Ladd, and I think he punched out Hemingway, or Hemingway punched out him. And in any event, I think what happens is these poetry scholars and these MFA types, you go, listen, I got to take my job seriously. And when you see something like Stevens, you're already in this serious mode. So you go looking for these interpretations. And with Stevens, the notion that Wallace Stevens is kind of fucking with people, I don't think poet critics want to admit, because it makes them seem trivial, right? As opposed to saying, well, if he's just fucking around with language, what does that mean on a metaphysical level? It means that the language that we use might just be messing with us, which, given the amount of philosophizing that's gone around Stevens, I think it scares people to think that maybe there isn't this, existential Sartrean meaning behind everything. Maybe it is just guys twirling, concubescent cigars and hanging around peacocks. I think people are more willing to admit that someone like Hart Crane was messing around, but I think there's just the notion that he's an insurance salesman. He has to be stoic and stodgy. He must mean something serious with all these poems. But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe if you spend all your day selling insurance, you want to have a little, wacky one-off free verse, to keep yourself sane. It reminds me of Charles Ives, avant-garde composer, also big in the insurance world of the 1920s and 30s, also lived up in Connecticut. These very old-school Yankee types. Not sure if they knew each other.
I think the thing, though, is critics want to put things into simple boxes. They want everything to be simple.
Yeah.
Before seeing this abortion-like comments about this poem, probably the most misinterpreted poem that Stevens wrote that people have written about fairly widely was Yellow Afternoon, which is a nightmare. I mean, it's a fucking George Romero nightmare image-wise. I mean, it's a terrifying poem. If all you think is you say, the sea rolled and rolled the sea, and to Key West so went the sea. If that's your image of, but when you read something like Yellow Afternoon, and you don't read it in a Wallace Stevens voice, if you read it in a New York accent like me, it's fucking a terrible, scary poem, a great poem, and it's one. And I did another video because Wallace Stevens video started coming up. I saw the 10 greatest poems of Wallace Stevens. I mean, this is better. I mean, than a lot of his longer poems. I mean, he's got great poems that go on for 5, 6, 7 pages. Yeah. But Yellow Afternoon is maybe slightly over a page long, and it's a train that's just barreling down the track. But just like with the poem we mentioned, Emperor of Ice Cream, Wallace Stevens can't be humorous, and Wallace Stevens can't be writing about a nightmare. He's Mr. Philosophy.
Right. It always seems as you say, putting people into boxes, but it doesn't occur to me how much of a leveling effect that can have on poets, where you go, well, he's Wallace Stevens, he always writes Wallace Stevens, and then you get this averaged out idea of what a Wallace Stevens is without acknowledging that, you look at someone even as mundane as a Spielberg, they're not always doing the same emotion.
But it has a more insidious effect, and my wife Jessica told me that one of the things that she found about me personally and my writing when she first encountered us, and we were just writing to each other 26 years ago, she said that I, with my straight-on interpretations and opinions about things, gave her sort of confirmation that she wasn't crazy, because she would read something, let's say, about the Emperor of Ice Cream and say, this is about death, and she'd look at this and say, this is actually kind of funny, but there's something wrong with me. My mind must be broken.
Of course.
And I've had this happen with many young people. And I said, just read. Don't read the criticism first. Read. And if you need to look up what concupiscent means, do so. But
even
then
the word itself is
work it out in your mind. Read it over a few times. If you still can't get it, then look what someone says. But if you're reading something and you're saying that's pretty funny, and someone says, no, this is a serious meditation on Mephistophelianism or something, that's and this is why, if you go through my Cosmoetica essays on poems, my This Old Poems or whatnot, I absolutely destroy so many of these bullshit. Another thing is I recently watched the film Blow Up again. Because I saw some things and I didn't like some of the videos these young people made. And again, for the 1000th time, they keep calling the photographer Thomas, even though that's just in the notes for the film. Nowhere in the film does it say, Thomas, Schneider, photographer. It doesn't say anything. But this is just PR that's been wrapped into the actual film. Same thing with last year at
tipping their hat that they've already polluted their understanding.
And last year at Marienbad is another one, I think, where they throw in a name of a character. I forget what, but I think it's Marienbad. But this is when critics don't engage, first of all, with the art. They engage with other critics about the art, which is why you get these misinterpretations that keep going and going, because it shows that this critic wasn't actually reading it. They were just regurgitating what another critic said. So that's how you get these misinterpretations.
And that's kind of for those not in the know, I'm currently attending law school, and that's really my main focus, is that you want to talk about people who misread a sentence and 300 years later we're still talking about it. Go to law school, because I've started to become more and more obsessed with it over okay, we can all agree that Dana Gioia and Dan Schneider have a very different set of opinions on the same poem. That's all well and good, and we can sit here and go back and forth. Well, what are those differences? What are the similarities? That's usually what they give you in English class. I'm more interested in this existential background of what in their lives resulted in these two people coming to have interpretive faculties, if that's what we're going to call it, that can be so wildly discrepant. And I mean, you just have to look at any Supreme Court ruling. And these are people that went to universities, the highest, echelon of academia in the world. So you would think that they would have, similar backgrounds, similar understanding of the law, but it seems the more they progress in their careers, the more assured they are, their interpretation must be the right one, and so they go around imposing it on others, which again results in like the next crop of literary critics thinking, well, it must have been what Harold Bloom said in 1975. It couldn't possibly be what I think this poem means because I don't see that in the critical scholarly literature.
Well,
and it kind of pisses me off.
Let me talk about the stolidity of the law. So I mentioned how my job, I'm treated like shit, not personally because of me. Everyone at that place is treated like shit.
Yes.
So I was recently called to jury duty in my county. And this was the second straight year, third year in 5, and 5th time in 9 years that I've been called. And I've gotten out of it every time.
You're kidding me.
No. And I've been called maybe about 15, 16 times in the 43 years since I reached adulthood. So
are you the only one left?
Yeah. So I said I want an excusal. They denied the excusal. I had to then call 2 days before I was supposed to appear. This was back on May 6th. And I would have to call a number and then get an email to email. So they gave me the email, and this is what I wrote. I said, "My name is Daniel Schneider. I was called for jury duty, blah, blah, wherever. I requested excusal and was denied. Told I must call and email on 5/6 to request excusal, and am doing so. 1. I have been called 2 straight years and 5 times in the last decade, while others I've known have never been called for jury duty. This seems unfair. 2. I have assorted traumas from dealing with the justice system. These include physical and sexual abuse on myself when I was a child, as well as seeing same happen to other children. 3. I also saw 2 cops sexually assault a female drug addict when I was a teen. 4. I also once worked in a county court's juvenile section as a file clerk and saw many files of legal abuses, including a teen girl driven to suicide by a judge's poor rulings. In that same court, I often heard the bailiffs make racist jokes about minority folks they dealt with when cops. 5. I was later laid off from the court when they elected a pro-wrestler turned governor who gutted the county court system. 6. I have been wrongly ticketed into speed traps a few times. 7. I was once interviewed to sit on a jury but dismissed by the 2 lawyers when they wasted a whole day refusing to seat certain candidates in a clear abuse of the system. 8. I believe in the professional jury system because of these things and think jury by peers is a large reason why the criminal justice system is failing. All of these reasons should be sufficient to attest that I am not disposed to being open-minded about a system I see as unfair and flawed. I ask to be excused and removed from any future calls to jury duty service. I do not want to change someone's life for the ill by being wrong. I have no right to be on a jury, nor do I have any responsibility to be on a jury. Daniel Schneider." An hour and 20 minutes later, you are excused.
There you go. All you have to
I had to go through all of that.
Yeah. Well, the word that comes to mind, Mr. Schneider, is Kafkaesque. Yeah. Anytime you have to deal with the court to tell the court how you don't want to deal with the court because of how the court has dealt with you, one has led to the Bard of Prague, Franz Kafka. Yeah. Interesting. Well, it's also, I like the network of semiotics when the callback to Jesse the Body Ventura. It all comes together. It's funny. I was just having a conversation with my mom about this. She was saying, and I remember the words of my mother echoing in my ears when I was 10. It was like, that wrestling is fake, right? Yeah. And when you're 10 and you hear that, you think, oh, they're not really hitting each other. This is all a ruse. And then you turn 18 and you realize not only were they actually hitting each other, these guys are all dying at like 35. They are suffering the most brutal impacts because they know that people think it's fake. So now they're working 10 times as hard to prove it. In any case, she had just watched the Hulk Hogan documentary. And just it's kind of funny because just realizing that these are like normal people with everyday lives, like going to punch someone and hit them with a trash can.
Well, someone like a Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair, the top 2%, 3% of wrestlers, they make the money. The rest of them are the guys who are in there for a few years, and they either get injured or
oh my God.
they end up driving a school bus, and then they end up doing the fan shows 40 years later, selling their autographs for $50 a pop or whatever. And we're talking about that battle they had in Providence, Rhode Island with the wacky Frenchman or something. And this is one of the things that I've always liked about wrestling is it seemed to be the most grounded. Like I said, you would see fat, hairy, bald wrestlers with hairy backs, usually named Moose, from parts unknown in Canada. Coming to the Garden, getting their moment, their one title shot with Bruno Sammartino. They make in 1975 $50,000. That's their big haul in their career. They can talk about being at the sold out Garden, and then the rest of their life is a nightmare.
Yes, and that's what I love it. This is what I live for. Yeah, it's almost it's the epitome of the American dream. I think you read my detective novel. It's very funny. There was a scene of professional wrestling, and then again, what I discussed with my mom was basically how someone like Donald Trump is kayfabe. That is his character. The crazy thing about this, Dan, and I think you're one of the few people literate enough and also acquainted with lowbrow, sweaty guys grappling, is in the wrestling business, there's this joke about, that guy believes his gimmick. He really believes that he's this superhero that's able of super kicking a guy halfway across the ring. I don't think Trump is intelligent enough to realize that he's a character. I think that there's no there. It's just he is bought into his gimmick.
Yeah, and I think that if you know anything about his father was the thing is the father would have been a real Nazi had he been in Germany. I think Donald Trump is not someone who is comfortable with the Nazi stuff. He'll the old thing about Hitler. What was Hitler really did he really believe his stuff, or was he just acting the part? His father was the true believer. Trump acts the part. He is internalized what his dad did. You have to remember, they are the Dark Kennedys. Fred Trump Jr. was the golden boy. He was the first child. Donald was child number 2. Only in the late 50s, or was it the 60s, when Donald's older brother, Frederick, died young, did Donald ascend to be the golden boy. And so I think there's the kernel in Donald Trump that knows that he's a fraud, that knows that he was not the chosen son, and he has spent the last 60 years trying to win his fucked up dead father's approval, and he's going to fuck over anyone who wants to do it. He's raised his own 2 sons, not including the tall 7-foot geek son that he has. His 2 oldest sons are a bunch of crooks and con men. What can I or you even say about Donald Trump that hasn't been said and is obvious? The country will survive him, but it's going to be a far worse country, and it's going to set us back 20 years minimum economically. China, I think most of artificial intelligence, as we know it, is a fraud. In terms of the intellect, we're going to have robots probably in the next 5 or 10 years, but it's only going to be for the rich people. You and I are not going to be able to afford robots. Most people can't afford their own fucking car.
Yeah.
And the only robots that are going to be useful are things like a Roomba,
Yeah. Well, that's all I really want. I mean, I think ever since I was 7, it's like, can we just get a robot that cleans my house? I don't care. You can screw me over with the capitalism. I don't even care anymore. I just don't want to have to do my dishes. I mean, you said it yourself. What can we say about Trump that hasn't already been said? But I'm personally curious because you do have something of a moralistic slant to you. Do you think Trump is evil, or do you think he's too stupid to even really know?
I'm someone who's, you have to deal with reality. It doesn't matter what he is. The end results. If the end result is born of stupidity, born of malice, there's the old saying, never ascribe to malice what can be adequately explained by stupidity. It doesn't matter if it's all fucked up. If you came home and saw me standing over your girlfriend with a smoking gun, does it matter whether I killed her or whether someone else killed her, drugged me, and stuck the gun in my hand? Your girlfriend is still dead.
That's a good legal question. Yeah. Well, all right, I'll put it another way. Would you put Trump in your Tetramall?
If I knew him personally, the 4 characters in my evil trilogy, the first one was about this teenage kid I worked with who had a plan to kidnap a girl to Lake George and rape her
Oh my
because
God.
and I stopped him. I
And
won't,
he told you about
I won't go into how I stopped him. He's alive, but I stopped him. Then there was this gangster guy, this politician that I have written many times about in different situations called John Doe. He used to have sex with underage girls, even though he was against abortion, and he was involved with organized crime. The one I most recently did was about this guy who used to stalk these girls that I knew in the arts outside in another city than where I currently live. And then the final one will be the pedophile who was, I think, killing bag boys at a supermarket that I worked with. And so the worst of them is going to be the last of them. But the first two of them I did within my first 12 or 15 plays. I went 100 plays before I did the third one, and I'll probably do 2 or 3 plays. I got to do 2 more plays on my what I call my Proto-Indo trilogy of plays where I'm looking at society. And then I got a list of ideas. I'll show you a book here. I've got this book that gives me some ideas. I got this at a book sale years ago called 1001 Days. It's 1001 historical days. For example, it'll list. Whoops, just going to here. 1770, April 19th. Terra Australis comes into view. Captain Cook sights Australia and charts the eastern coast for the British Crown. And so there were other days here. The Slave Republic, 1801, July 7. Toussaint Louverture writes a new constitution for Saint Dominique. So you have all of these kinds of things, and then I'll have this
superstar Billy Graham.
So sometimes you want to go back and forth between low key stuff. You want to go through the high philosophy, and I'll watch something. Or maybe I'll talk to you or Alex Sheremit, and you'll say something or mention something, and I'll say, "Oh, that would be interesting. Let me look that up." Or something will happen at work, and I'll remember something. Maybe I probably did 12 or 15 plays about different females that I was involved with to one degree or another, and you just have to be open to things. This is one of the things that's the most frustrating about a lot of artists is that they have such a limited idea of what the purview of art can be that they self-censor without even knowing it.
Yeah. Well, and then that plays into the critics who also, with whatever they produce, which is already self-censored, then they'll level that down. So you get it's not even a cleaned up or sterilized view. You sometimes just get a completely inaccurate depiction of what that person thought they were writing when they wrote it. Anyways, I was curious if there were different like emotional tolls with let's say you're writing a short project versus a long project, and then these tetramal works where you're focusing on someone who's a real bastard. Or if writing to you is all writing, or if maybe you end a novel and you're like, man, that one took it out of me.
Every one of them is unique, and like I said, when I drop something, I drop it totally. So I've got a clean slate, and so it's as I go into each project, it's not like I said. I mean, there have been times when, like I mentioned, I didn't want to do maybe a book with more gangsters in it for, like you mentioned, with the Bruiser Brody thing. Was that the one with who was the guy? Jimmy Snuka? Was that with Snuka?
No, this was down in Puerto Rico. I forget. I think his name was Invader Number 1.
Yeah,
the guy that stabbed.
Didn't Snuka kill his girlfriend down in Puerto Rico?
Snuka also allegedly killed his girlfriend out in Hawaii.
Okay, it was Hawaii. Okay.
There's a lot of murderers in the wrestling business.
Yeah, but again, I had done a lot of gangster stuff, and to me, it was more. To me, the incendiary moment of a possible race riot in Cleveland was more interesting than because you didn't have to have gangsters in it. This wasn't
Mm-hmm.
if it had been a boxing match between Muhammad Ali and say Jerry Quarry, who was one of the great white hopes
Mm-hmm.
of the 1960s or 70s in heavyweight boxing, and it had caused a similar riot to the Ladd Ox Baker thing, that might have interested me more in maybe going back into the gangster thing, because
Mm.
anyone who knows me knows I can't stand Muhammad Ali. I never could. I thought he was a suck ass for the mafia, and
Oh,
and
okay.
all of this stuff about him standing up for civil rights, and this, the guy made millions of dollars for killers. So to me, don't give me this bullshit about him some great civil rights. He wasn't fucking Martin Luther King. He wasn't
Yeah.
even fucking Malcolm X. He was a guy who was promoting himself. He was calling Joe Frazier a fucking gorilla. He was calling George Foreman who couldn't tie his own shoes. He was using black stereotypes against other people to prop himself up, and so to me he was a total phony. I couldn't stand Muhammad Ali. I can't. I mean, I found it sad how he ended. But
Yeah.
if someone was going to end that way, better him than Joe Frazier or George Foreman. I'm glad George Foreman at least made millions selling his goddamn George Foreman cooking things, because at least he seemed like a cool guy. Muhammad Ali was a stuck-up piece of shit. There's a video of him, Muhammad Ali, with Will Chamberlain. And anyone who knows me knows I love Will Chamberlain. I think he was the
Okay.
greatest pro athlete in recorded history. And if he had fought Muhammad Ali, he would have fucking knocked his block off. And yet there's this scene where Muhammad Ali, and you can see the fear in Muhammad Ali's eyes, but he's doing his
Yeah,
little
yeah.
dance and playing. He was, to me, just a total phony.
Any have you made a Wilt Chamberlain play?
Uh, no, I don't think there's anything that conducive about it. I mean, Will Chamberlain, on a personal level, I mean, aside from the 20,000 women claim, which I wouldn't
Right.
want to go into that. He was, in many ways, he was a sellout. He was a Nixon Republican.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Right.
and he was someone who, I mean, I guess I could. If I did maybe if I did something with Arnold Schwarzenegger, I could do a scene with him and Will Chamberlain filming one of his movies, but that's about it.
So I guess we've kind of talked about wrestling, talked a little bit about basketball, talked about boxing. Were you into sports as a kid?
I love sports in terms of doing it. I was pretty much. I don't have good hand-eye coordination. I have bad eyesight, probably stemming from that. So I was never good. Plus, I have a body where I have a short torso. I have long limbs, so I'm like an arachnid. And so,
Yeah.
The only two sports that I had any kind of prowess in, and it was meager, was in volleyball. For some reason, I was able to jump up and was good at blocking stuff.
Okay.
Now, but this is again intramural volleyball. And with basketball, I did try out for the basketball team. I think in my second, well, it actually would have been my junior year of high school, and I believe I was the 26th cut out of like 82 or 84 kids, something like that, which means that 63 other kids were cut before I was cut. But that still left me 15. So I wouldn't have even made the second team. I would have made the third team.
Yeah.
The one thing that I could do, though, I wasn't a good shooter, but I was good defensively. And the reason was I did have long arms. And someone once gave me advice, and I don't remember who is, if you look at any level of basketball, college, women's league, men's league, professional, whatever, European league, you see this all the time. Why the players are bad defensively? They take their eye off the ball. Stop looking at people's heads. Never leave, because there's gonna come a time when someone is gonna dribble the ball a little too slow, and you can knock it. Never especially when you're on man-to-man defense. Never take your eye off the ball. Always focus on the ball. And yet, 98% of the time, even Hall of Fame pro athletes do this, and I don't understand it. If they just always watch the ball in man to man, you can't do it when you're being outrun in a fast break. But if you're a man to man, you just smother it. And I was so good defensively that I remember a couple of bigger kids sometimes got so angry they'd take a swing at me because I was constantly knocking the ball away from them.
Yeah. That's so. Were you what was your main sport? You like baseball? That would be my guess.
When I was a kid, yeah, baseball. I originally liked the Mets in '69. I was only 4 years old, but by the time the Yankees came along with Thurman Munson and Chris Chambliss and then Reggie Jackson, I was a big Yankee fan. I always liked the Giants over the Jets. I went through a decade of suffering the Giants in the mid '70s. Then I liked in basketball. I do vaguely remember seeing a Knicks game in the early '70s when they were pretty good and won a couple of titles. But by the time I became a regular watcher, and I actually did go in the late '80s to early '90s when Patrick Ewing and Charles Oakley were around. I went to about 5 or 6 games at the Garden a year. I remember this. I went with this small kid. He had some medical issues, so he was only about 5'2", and he was a small kid. So we went to the game, and we were up in the blue seats. And Charles Oakley, who was this big, strong power forward, 6'9", 250 pounds of pure muscle, he'd always take these fucking 25-foot, 30-foot jumpers. It's like, you're 6'9", 250 pounds, built like a fucking Greek god. Go in and slam the ball in someone's face. So after one of the games, we're coming out to the parking lot, and we're driving up, and this little kid, some of the fans are complaining about the Knicks. I forget whether they won or lost, and he starts making racial remarks, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And
Charles Oakley?
No, to some black guys going down into 20 levels of cars. So I zoom the car, zoom, 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 and get out, pay up, boom, get out there. We're literally about just 5 seconds ahead of this mob of about 5 or 6 black people coming. I get into Manhattan. We end up going away. As we're getting to the Queensboro Bridge, I said, "You ever fucking do that again? I'm stopping the car, throwing your ass out there, and they'll be lynching a little white boy there."
Jesus Christ! I ask all old school New York sports fans this: do you have any memories of Billy Martin, famed Yankees manager?
Oh yeah, I mean, you had to, as a fan, Billy Martin bled Yankee pinstripes. I mean, he was, he could be an asshole, but George Steinbrenner kept hiring him again. Reggie Jackson, and he had interesting times together. The Yankees of the late '70s, the Bronx Zoo. This was New York at its absolute nadir. Crime was running rampant. Son of Sam was killing people. The city was in terror. The mafia, were having wars in the street. Drugs
Bronx
were rampant.
Was burning.
The Bronx, where I grew up, along the Brooklyn-Queens border, Bushwick, buildings were burnt out. It looked like Germany year zero after the war. It was a very interesting time, and it's one of those things. I can talk and legitimately say that these are some of the worst times I've been in because of the utter corruption at top with Trump and the idiocy of this whole Republican mentality. But I also grew up with, as you mentioned, Kent State and Nixon. What is it? Tin soldiers and Nixon's coming. The old Neil Young song. The whole waste. The utter waste of the Vietnam War, the use of Agent Orange, the defoliation of all of Southeast Asia, and the millions of people that weren't even killed during the war, whose children and great grandchildren still have missing limbs and fucked up things. Mining harbors, people still getting killed decades later. You had the Stonewall shit that started the gay rights stuff. You had all of this. The Equal Rights Amendment, the abortion stuff that the Democrats spent 50 years pissing away and doing nothing to get it into state constitutions rather than just relying on the fucking Supreme Court. So there's always been this shit. Spiro Agnew was corrupt, not as corrupt as Trump. Nixon was corrupt, not as corrupt as Trump, but still corrupt. And and I've said this before, if Gerald Ford has done his fucking job and sent his former boss and let him go to prison, Trump would not be doing the shit. You wouldn't have had the dissent. You had the fucking president of the United States, a guy who wasn't even elected vice president, Gerald Ford, basically said it's all open. It goes back to Gerald Ford. And I didn't like Nixon. I hated Ronald Reagan. But if you want to know why we have this open corruption, Gerald Ford started that. He should have
didn't have the balls.
Yeah, he was a total pussy.
Fell down all the time too. So I mean, you say that the '70s were the nadir of New York. I mean, it was also, in my mind, New York at its most New Yorkiest. Like,
so I actually wrote in my book that I said the city of all cities.
Yeah. So it was the nadir and the zenith in a strange way. I mean, pre-Giuliani.
Pre-Disney.
Yeah, and you really see, it's really not even, they're not even hiding it. Like, most of Trump's rhetoric is straight out of the Nixon playbook. What astonishes me, and I think would probably be astonishing to most people my age if they really looked into it, is the crime, quote unquote, that Nixon committed. Trump does worse on a daily basis. You know, like breaking into a hotel and stealing some documents from the DNC just seems like part and parcel for what's occurring on a, you know,
but
the average Tuesday.
You're letting what's the saying? The slippery slope. The slippery. Gerald Ford waxed the hillside.
Yeah. There was already a slippery slope, and then it's so strange to see how Trump mixes and matches like a really shitty cocktail. He'll take bits of Nixon, he'll take bits of Reagan, he'll take bits of George Bush, and they all get the worst parts of these presidents, and they've been combined into a Frankenstein monster who is, I mean, you said, well, Trump's going to put us back 20 years, but 20 years ago we had Bush, and Bush was setting us back 20 years. So now we're
Dick Cheney
Cheney
just died. If you went back 20 years, you'd be hard pressed to think someone could be worse than Cheney.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the debates I've always had is like, is Bush, I think that Trump personally is worse than George Bush, but I think the George Bush administration, being full of political, career politicians, knew how to push and pull the strings and levers to really devastate the country with, No Child Left Behind, what have you. And then that's why it was always struck me as odd when you see when he was still alive, if you can call it living, Dick Cheney speaking out against Donald Trump as if he hadn't been directly responsible for the kind of rise of right-wing neo-fascism that we see in the current atmosphere. I don't know, Dan.
And the thing that gets me is the Democrats are still who the fuck
the most milquetoast, lackluster.
Who wants Gavin Newsom? I could maybe get on board with AOC. I don't know if I'd vote for. I wouldn't vote for Buttigieg. I can't because they are the epitome of neoliberalism, and neoliberalism is a scourge because it dulls the mind.
Right.
You would not have Trump if you didn't have 40 years of neoliberalism before that.
Precisely. Well, and as you say, like, if you look at someone like Pelosi or Schumer, fundamentally, as old white people, they benefit tacitly from right-wing policies, so they have no incentive to actually stop it. And then they just sit around for 40 years and they say, well, you either vote for us or you get a full-blown neo-Nazi. So, it's kind of
you have
rock and a hard place.
Let's go from 51 years, the end of the Vietnam War, and that was a total billions wasted back then. How many trillions have been wasted in the 50 years since? Trillions wasted on giving aid and comfort to the British Empire in the Falklands. Aid and comfort to Ferdinand Marcos and the Shah before he was overthrown. Aid and comfort to now Putin. Netanyahu. All of these people. All of these trillions wasted, and yet we never have money. We can't fund national health care. I mean, if you look at Medicare, for example, I'm 61. I'm getting my things in order for a few years to maybe get on Medicare if I don't have a job or if I retire early or whatnot. But it's not free. It should be a pittance. But
Yeah.
a lot of people get screwed over by with the way that you have to withdraw certain certain taxable accounts versus non-taxable accounts. The whole thing is just a mine yard, and it's all designed to screw the little people. But what if and the idea that we, as the supposed richest nation ever, can't do things like that, can't have college educations, can't do it, and then we're supposed to just sit back and say, well, let's let all the robots take over, even if 90% of it wasn't bullshit about AI. Let the robots take over. Well, people want to do things. Most people, I have a guy next week when I'm off who's coming to install some flooring for us, and he runs his own small business. What, we're going to have robots do that? Do I really want robots to come in, even if, let's say, they could do it at a third the price or whatnot? Why would I want that when you want? And I'm not against robots per se. Let's say that you get artificial intelligence and we can prove that they do have some form of consciousness, the way that certain birds, parrots and corvid birds have, or the way elephants have. Even if they have that rudiment, I'm perfectly fine with dealing with them and giving them rights. But you don't want to strip the essence of the human condition. Do we want to be a bunch of lotus eaters, a bunch of Eloi? No. That doesn't mean we have to be Morlocks, but you have to have what is the purpose of doing anything? You can't. They say, oh, people will be free to create art and do that. We have enough bad art. We don't need more fucking bad artists. What, are you kidding me?
Yeah. And to your point, is what really blows my mind is how little you're really asking for. You're like, can I just get cheap, insulin and not have my humanity crushed by a robot? And the answer is a resounding no. We are going to crush everything that is good, and we are going to give trillions of dollars, not just billions, but trillions, to like 3 guys, because they own like a warehouse. They own a couple data centers, so now they get $1 trillion.
And the thing is, we could stop this here in the U.S. and we could say we're not going to build these data centers. You talk about nuclear reactors too. Well, people at one point got sick and tired in the 70s and they said, no, it's too expensive. It's not worth it. We're not going to do nuclear reactors, which is actually a good thing. People now try to say, oh, nuclear reactors are green. I'll believe that when I see it. And you give me a 5-year study that shows that. But we know, for example, that these data centers are using up water. They're using up electricity, gobbling it. For what purpose? So that we can get badly written essays?
Yes.
And even
exactly.
even if we could, they could achieve sentience, and even if putting aside the Terminator or the Forbin Project, nuclear winter kind of thing, even if that's just bullshit, it's still making philosophical zombies out of the vast majority. It's not going to affect me. I'm already nearing retirement. But even if I was a 20-year-old, back to 20 years old, I'd still have my art and stuff to do. But most people, like you said, it's just for this small class, and it's not even millionaires. It's not even the Walton type billionaires of Walmart. It's just for these fucking guys who believe that they're the Time Lords from Doctor Who.
Yeah. They're gonna go to space and they're gonna do all this great stuff.
Please, Musk. I'd say Musk, go to space. Lost in space. Let's find him crash onto Ceres, in 50 years. But he's not going to go. He's going to pay people to go, and he's going to have some deaths on his hand because his rockets, from what I've read, his rockets don't meet most of the NASA standards.
No,
he's cutting a lot of bullshit that they don't have backup redundancies and all that kind of stuff. But what?
Making an interesting remark about if AI attains some level of sentience, do they get rights like an orangutan? I'll have to look into this. I would assume they do. What concerns me is people always go like, oh, what if in 5 to 10 years we get AI and they're sentient, or they're, and from what I've experienced the last couple of years, I feel like AI is more conscious than some of the people I interact with. Like, it's just.
Well, LLMs are designed to give that effect.
That's
the
true.
thing. They
true.
are designed that way. Most people, it's hard because you don't want to sound too backpatting, but people who don't understand art, people who don't have a higher degree of understanding about the cosmos, tend to fall back into these terrible tropes, these belief systems. I'm actually hoping to do a show in the next month or so with a guy who wrote a book about why people believe in the paranormal and the supernatural. And I think it's because people don't understand reality, and they want simple explanations. There has to be, for example, you've probably seen the famous Bigfoot film from the 60s, the female Bigfoot supposedly walking across, called the Patterson Gimlin film. I did a show with a guy a year or two ago, and he said he taught in Korea, and he would show this film, this 44 seconds or whatever it is, and the people in Korea used to laugh at how obviously it was a man in a suit, because they hadn't been conditioned like the dumbed down American culture. They could step back and see that it's clearly fake. Just like if you remember that infamous photo called the surgeon's photo of the Loch Ness Monster, where it was clearly like a cardboard or wooden cutout. And it just absolutely looked fake. Now, why do people want to believe in this stuff? Why do people want to believe that aliens are coming in and taking semen samples? You look at the first supposed abduction, Betty and Barney Hill. They know from where they were driving and what they described that over which mountains, they know that they actually saw the full moon. I mean, literally, because things are so clockwork on a solar system basis, they know exactly where the moon was, and they know that Betty and Barney Hill saw. They were driving for 5-6 hours, tired. It's midnight or whatever it is, So they're in that kind of twilight state. And they're seeing the moon passing over the mountains as they're driving. This is scientifically indisputable. There's a guy who wrote a book and who's done, again, just as you can predict, you can look back in records, April 5th, 1967, the sun rose at, 6:46 a.m. or whatever it was, You can know that without a doubt. You know where the moon was, and you know that it was not a cloudy sky, and that's what they saw. But people want to believe this stuff. And whether we're talking God or we're talking Bigfoot or we're talking rapist aliens or whatever, people want to believe this nonsense. This is why they fall for the MAGA shit too. This is why they fell for Ronald Reagan. You can cut taxes on the rich people and they'll just let the money just trickle down.
Yes.
We're still waiting for the rain 50 years later.
What could go wrong? Yes. Well, and that's, we don't need to get too political, but that's really what pisses me off the most is
Get political. Don't worry about it. You're not going to offend me.
The old joke of like, well, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Yeah. What really pisses me off mostly about Republicans, but I'm sure everybody does this, is, okay, you had your hypothesis. We're going to cut taxes to the rich, and then it's all going to trickle down. Even now, you'll get Republicans that will admit, oh, that didn't work. But that doesn't mean they're going to stop being Republican. They're never going to have a moment where they go, my ideology kind of led me to do something that I don't think was quite effective. I'm going to reevaluate my political beliefs and maybe do something different. Like the premier example. I remember being a kid and growing up in rural Oregon and protesting the invasion of Iraq. Now, if anybody knows anything about rural Oregon, there's a lot of rednecks. And so the rednecks would fucking beat the shit out of my friends, and they'd honk their horns at you, and they'd really, make you try and feel like you're an un-American or something. 20 years later, all these people are admitting that Iraq was a blunder. We spent trillions of dollars in Iraq. We should have never done it. So now you're willing to listen to the critique of the military-industrial complex. Does that mean we can progress and have a conversation about, like, defunding, no, don't, it's impossible, you can never go there. So apparently, even if a Democrat is right 20 years ago, they could never be right in the future. I don't know if I made a compelling point there. It's just
But here's why I don't like the Democrats, and it goes back to abortion, because in 50 years they didn't get it into state constitutions. That they just let it hang out there. When this is 1982, 83, I'm walking in a couple of girls who worked as prostitutes into, not far from where Alex Sherriman lives in Jamaica, Queens, into an abortion center. And so I'm 16 or 17 at the time. The girls are about the same age or a year younger than me. I took in about 4 or 5 different girls at different times. One time I went with this girl who I was the closest to, and it wasn't my kid, or my, it was, I had no tie other than I was just helping her out. So we're going up the stairs, and it's about, maybe a dozen stairs, concrete stairs, and there's these people that are protesting, and so we're walking up the stairs, and about a half a dozen people, they start throwing like ketchup and tomatoes. This is your baby as blood, and I told her keep ignoring it, and a couple of them, this big fat fuck comes running up, and he's probably in his early mid-40s at the time. I'm 17, and I see him coming up, and I'm not Bruce Lee, but I took my right leg and just kicked him right in the solar plexus, and he fucking collapsed down and rolled like a fucking dough ball down the stairs. And an hour and a half, 3 hours, 2 hours, whatever it was later, I mean, it's a 5-minute procedure just to get rid of it and the fetus. And we're coming out, and the guy sees me, and they sort of do the Moses thing. They part and let us pass without anything. This is what Democrats don't do. Sometimes you gotta kick someone in the teeth.
Sometimes you gotta kick a guy in the solar plexus.
Yeah. And they won't do that. And I see some of these left wing guys with YouTube channels, and they bring up correctly. They're like people like I think the guy in Pennsylvania, the Democrat in Pennsylvania, people like Gavin Newsom, who still is enamored with these billionaire frat boys. They will not stand up to these people.
No.
So the choice that you're given is fucking the Democrats with more neoliberalism, which will spawn in 20 years. 20 years ago we had the tea baggers. Now we have the maggots. In 2050 we'll have the tea maggots or whatever.
Exactly.
And you have to cut the head off. You have to destroy the Democratic Party before you can destroy the Republican Party. They don't get it, and they're dooming the rest of us. And I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ! I wish there was some place where I could go other than the U.S. I could take Jessica, live for the next 30 or 40 years before we both drop dead. But the only places are maybe Central America. I don't want to move to Portugal. I don't want to move to Australia or wherever. So maybe I'm hopefully by the time I can retire, maybe Jessica has a job she can phone in, and I can move to maybe the old El Paso area or southern New Mexico or some shit. I don't know. Just get farther away from people. Leave me alone in the fucking desert.
You were never compelled to go to Canada?
When I was my dad during the Vietnam War, when I was 7 or 8 years old in 73, I remember my dad making plans to send me to Canada when I turned 18 because he feared the Vietnam War would go on through the 80s. But me, myself, generally speaking, I lived in Minnesota, and Minnesota is sometimes called the 11th province of Canada. But Minnesotans and Canadians have this cultural identity of victimhood, and it's a very fucked up kind of way to look at life. I'm not saying that New York, I grew up in violence and poverty. In Minnesota, it was mental derangement, and in Texas, it's a bunch of political Yahooism. I've lived in 3 states. All of them were fucked up in their times and their eras. And if I moved to fucking New Mexico, who knows? The ghost of Pancho Villa might come up and slaughter all the gringos. And there I go.
Fucking Manhattan Project Part 2. I'm curious, personal question. I know you were raised by not your biological family, but were your parents and those around you kind of as gung-ho and self-driven and motivated, or is this a Dan specific thing where you're able to, like, I go shopping, I write 5,000 words, I go, walk my dog, whatever. It's a highly motivated.
Well, neither of my parents were creative. My dad, my dad went senile when I was about 13. He died when I was 18 of chronic lymphatic lymphoma and leukemia. So my dad was a gung-ho union man. My dad had a fifth grade education. He didn't make it through sixth grade. This was when the Great Depression started, actually a year or so before the Great Depression. But I found my dad was one of these people. If you remember the old show Cheers, when Norm would walk in, people go, "Hey, Norm." That's when my dad would drive a health van. When I was a kid, I'd go on the summers with my dad. Wherever my dad went, it was like a rock star. Eddie Schneider, there he is. Eddie, how you going? And old black ladies who worked there would come and hug him and kiss him, and the patients knew him, because he was coming. This was during the sickle cell anemia crisis in New York, where black people were dying because I don't know if you know what sickle cell is when deformed blood cells can't get through openings, and people would get blood clots and die. But anyway. And my mom, on the other hand, my mom was very smart. My mom had graduated high school at 16. By 18, she was graduated from college, and by 19, she had graduated business school, and she was an accountant. She could have been the head of several big accounting departments in New York, but she wanted a family. That didn't work out. My parents couldn't have kids. That's why me and my sister were adopted, and. But my mom was very smart. She's the one who would give me books. She'd give me books. And when I say give books, not just, she would give me, Anne of Green Gables, Tom Sawyer and whatnot. But I was much more interested in dinosaur books about star formation and astronomy. I was the typical kid that liked big things, stars and dinosaurs. But I read a lot. I used to have these great Rand McNally books on maps of the world and the U.S., and unfortunately I don't have them anymore. They're probably worth something today, but I would devour them. I remember looking at maps of the Aral Sea, and now you look at the Aral Sea, it's 1/10 of what it was. It's a Mad Max wasteland.
Yeah, it's like the Salton Sea down in California. They all dry up.
But about 10 times worse, because the Salton Sea was... The Salton Sea is about the size of what the Aral Sea is now.
Yeah. Okay, so if your father never graduated 6th grade and your mother went to business school, where do they meet?
They met at a dance. And I didn't find out. I didn't find out until years later. They had met at a dance when my mom was 16 and my dad was 22. My dad then went off to the Civilian Conservation Corps camps for a couple of years. He came back. He met my mom again. My mom had gotten engaged to some Swedish guy, but then broke up with it. And I didn't find out until my mom, many years later, told me that she had been raped at one of these school dances. This is back in like 1938, 39. And my dad was one of the few guys who it didn't bother him that she wasn't a virgin because of that. And so...
Jesus.
Yeah. So... it's one of those things, and I'm only talking about it. My mom's been dead for 17 years. My dad's been dead for now 43 years. So, but these are these kinds of things that, and it shows, because my mom never had mentioned anything like that. And the funny thing is, because like I if you look in my my True Life books, I talk about how I had been assaulted with some weapons, sometimes held against some of my more private parts, but you never know what goes on with people. So this is why I try. This is why I try to not judge people too harshly. If people relentlessly, like sometimes you have bosses who are real assholes who just go after you. If I see that not only just against myself but against other people, meaning that's something that really wears at me, and because there's no reason for human beings to do that to other human beings, and that's something I have in common with my dad. My dad, like I said, was very good with people, and he understood people. My dad worked with Puerto Ricans and black people and Jews and Christians and Native Americans too. And he was well liked. I mean, my dad was one of those. Like I said, he was like Norm. He wherever he would go, people knew Eddie Schneider. And Eddie Schneider had a great reputation, which is the opposite of me. Most people hate me on first sight, but that's because I deal with things at a higher level. When you're just dealing with playing poker with people or whatnot, people aren't going to get too pissed off if you annoy them more. But it goes to the old saying, people generally, and this is true in my experience, people will forgive you if you're wrong about something. People will never forgive you if you're right about something and they're wrong.
Yeah. Well, that was always my problem. As you grow up in Oregon, my parents were Berkeley hippies, so they moved us up to Oregon, and it's a lot slower paced, and most of the kids you're around are like, 4-H types, and they don't read books. So anytime you kind of get and by you, I mean me, you get the reputation as being kind of an annoying, know-it-all, liberal, hippie kind of kid, when really you're just like, I don't know how you don't know these basic facts of humanity, or where you'll come across people that are really insistent on they're very confident about being something that they're incorrect about, and that never sat right with me. But as you say, the thing that really seemed to I outright enjoy it, punching up. I don't, seeing someone that is abusing their authority, now you have given me carte blanche to be terrible to you because you have crossed some moral barrier, which I have personally invented and have in my own mind. But that kind of attitude, I think, I'm sure you have something of the same. It's not conducive to moving up the socioeconomic ladder. Well, if you're always going after bosses or rich douchebags, they have a lot of weight to throw around.
To get back to what I earlier said about the jury duty thing, when I couldn't get out of it, I was like, these fuckers are going to make me come down. I'm going to be pissed. But I'm going to be very calm and pissed, and I'd read off those 8 points I had, and I'd look at them. I said, do you really want me to decide on whether you're going to get money or not, or whether you're going to jail or not? Because I'm not happy.
Yeah. Well, and that, it brings up an interesting legal question where it's like, okay, that just means that the only people getting on juries are the people that are un-Dan Schneider-like. Maybe that's why we get so many heinous court rulings, is because the juries that they're going after are like the lowest common denominator,
and
inoffensive.
There are problems with the idea of professional jurors. I acknowledge that. You could have people who get too jaded, but then you'd have to have some system of review, and these people would have to write, let's say, why they voted this way or that way in this case. I think that jury by peers, literally, I am against it. I wasn't just making a stand. I just don't see how you can have people doing their 7 or 8 objections or whatever they get for each jury, and then have people sit there and see how wickedly the system is abused, and expect them to not say nothing I'm gonna do is gonna make this right. I mentioned how a judge screwed up a girl thing. I wrote this play called Faith. There was a girl named Faith in Minnesota in the early 70s. And back around the turn of the century, when I worked as this file clerk, I had to destroy juvenile records after 7 years, so that by the time someone was 25, there'd be no trace that they'd ever committed a crime. I went back. This was in 2002. It was either 71 or 74, so the 28 or 31 years of backed up stuff. This is how far in arrears Hennepin County was in legally destroying things that could... 3 fucking decades. And so I would have to read, I forget what it was, but there would be 3 or 4 types of things that would have to be saved in that person's name. The rest had to be shredded. And I came across this one. Girl in 71 or 74 stole a sweater at Target. Over the next 4 or 5 years, she was sent to county homes. She was sexually assaulted several times. She tried committing suicide a couple of times, and then she finally hit the jackpot and killed herself in a 4.5 year period. All because some fucking asshole judge got harder and harder on her for stealing a fucking, at the time, probably $4.95 sweater. This and the thing is, that was maybe the most egregious one, and because of the name of the girl Faith, it made this perfectly for the title. Right. But you know, that's happened tens of thousands of times in the last century or more, where you've had this. I don't even know. Again, it's like talking about Donald Trump. I don't know what I can say anymore that could convince people that the system we have just doesn't work. If you want to believe differently, go ahead. I can't convince you.
There's nothing that can be really said. Yeah, I mean, I'm in a family law class right now, and it's one of the hard things about law school is just reading cases of people getting screwed over and just knowing that nothing can be done. In this case, that's not the one I'm looking for. Well, basically, back in the day, contraceptives were illegal. In the so we're reading about the history of kind of abortion rights. In the 19th century, there was a man named Comstock, and he went on a anti-vice crusade, which resulted in basically the entire country banning contraceptives, and you couldn't even really tell someone about contraceptives. So what he did is he went into this, they call her a madame, but I don't think she was running a brothel. She was basically running a 19th century Planned Parenthood, and he just harangued her. He pretended that he was a father of an unwanted child, and he just pestered this woman until she eventually relented and gave him some more information on what's the word? Basically on contraceptive, and then he immediately arrests her under a citizen's arrest. This woman was about 70 years old, and so not wanting to face jail time, she slits her throat. And Comstock's quote was, "A bloody end to a bloody life." So for over 100 years, we have been seeing just a hard pill to swallow, no pun intended, but just what can even be done? Because I'm not convinced that really, like, this is kind of why I gravitate toward the Wallace Stevens types, is I don't know if art really has the power to make societal changes. I think art...
It doesn't. Not in the short term. In the long term, possibly, but in the short term, no. And I'm so sick and tired of grouchy old white guys fucking up the world. It's like, go the fuck away.
Yes.
Go the fuck away.
Yes, go on an island. Yes.
You know, I'm so sick and tired. And the thing is, black people in this country have 400 years of shit. Okay, yes. They're not in literal chains anymore, but they're in economic chains. They're at the bottom of the food chain in many levels. And some white person will complain because someone they had 5 points less on some college entrance exam, and they're getting a little favoritism to go into college. Fuck you.
Yes. Well, it's what
I'm a fucking grouchy old white man, and I have the ability to see that's actually a good thing. You know, where the fuck slight inconvenience. Let's not slightly inconvenience the fucking white middle class because the classes below them, you know, just want to be able to breathe. Take the boot off their necks a little bit. God damn you fucking... And this is why you get the Musks and all these fucking rich fuckers, because they convince these moronic, grouchy, middle-class white people that they're somehow been screwed over. And yes, they may have been screwed over by the system a little bit here or there, but nothing compared to these other people. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up and get the hell out of here. Go to fucking some... Go to the Azores. Go to fucking Madagascar. Go. You know, go to the fucking Desolation Islands. You know, get rid of these people.
I think I've spent some time thinking about this because you know you see some of these people on the right that are they act
fear. They're fear. They're cowardly, shitty little people. They have no sense of self-worth. They can't look in a mirror without wanting to vomit.
And my take, they are quite unattractive. My take is that they've lived such sheltered lives that they hear about a word like oppression, and they go, well, I must have been oppressed at some point in my life, and now this most minor of grievances get blown up to the level of like the Atlantic slave trade, simply because they've never actually experienced hardship that is even remotely worth complaining about, let alone starting a political
But
movement
even if they had, it still doesn't compare
even
to
if
these
they
other
had,
people.
it would.
It doesn't compare to what
Right.
blacks or what Hispanics or what Native Americans have experienced here, because that is a daily thing. I can
Yes.
complain I have every right to complain about jobs that I've held currently or in the past, and the way the people that I've worked with. I've seen people treated horribly at jobs throughout my career, but those are not the systemic. They are sometimes against individuals because of some asshole manager, and yes, they are in a system, but it isn't the whole weight of the system coming down on you, and the inability to see these things, I don't even think is necessarily an inability. Yes, maybe they're just that fucking stupid, but a lot of them, it's not an inability. It's a lack of wanting to see it. They know it's there, and they don't give a flying fuck, because me. My dad used to fucking tell me and my sister, no me firsters. You don't ever be a me firster. There's always someone who needs it more than you. Whether it's a starving kid in India, in Africa, whether it's someone who's dying of cancer or whatnot. There's always someone more needy than you. You have to. And here's the thing: I'm not religious, but my dad and my mom were only nominally religious, but they meant it. They couldn't. My dad couldn't quote Bible verses, but he was inculcated into the idea. My dad was the name Schneider. People think, oh, all Germans are Nazis. No, there's a very deep tradition in German households of helping others, of having true socialism, not political socialism, communal socialism, and helping people. My dad, like I said, this was why my dad was beloved. My dad wasn't scared of being in the same room or shaking the hand of a black guy. My dad wasn't ashamed of getting a kiss from a Puerto Rican woman when he brought blood that could save lives. My dad treated them as just what they were. They weren't black, they weren't Hispanic, they weren't Native American, they were people. And my dad, with a 5th grade education, had the smarts to understand this. He understood people in an emotional level the way few people I've ever known have. These motherfuckers who are the lapdogs for these billionaires, and there are these people like, well, who's that little Jewish kid that's always bitching? He wears the yarmulke on.
Ben Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro. These types, those fucking fake blonde bitches that always complaining. The what's her name, Megyn Kelly, and then there's the one who's even uglier than her.
Ann Coulter types.
Yeah, all of these things. What these people.
What are you complaining about?
They are mental midgets. They're ridiculous.
True indeed, my friend. It appears our time is coming to a close. I did want to bring up. Well, we didn't have time to discuss Volman. We can
do that another time.
Yeah.
Let's try to do at least 2 or 3 of these a year.
We can try. I did want to ask, I haven't had time to read it, but you've written a play on objectivist poet Noreen Neidecker.
Yeah, Neidecker.
Why?
It's just it's coincidental, because just the other day I was talking to a law librarian about Charles Reznikoff's testimony. Another objectivist poet. He went through court records and then kind of whittled them down into this long epic poem. And then the other big name in objectivist poetry is Louis Zukofsky,
who's mentioned in the play.
I would assume is at least mentioned, because I believe
they were lovers.
Bringing it all together, I think he had her get an abortion.
Well, Noreen Neidecker is interesting. If you read that play, it goes through the various periods of her life. Her relationships with her father, with a couple of her husbands, with Zukofsky. You see the way she goes through these relationships and makes the same mistakes and lives this compact little life. I also did a poem, or rather a play about Hazel Hall, who was a woman, sort of an Emily Dickinson type from the Seattle, Portland area. and
Yeah.
and she was bound in a wheelchair. So both of them were good quality poets. Lorin Neidecker was, I think, easily the best of the objectivist poets.
Okay.
I don't
I
think
was
she
going to
was.
ask how you rank her.
I don't think she was a great poet, but she's an interesting poet, and so it makes it makes for an interesting topic, and she'll be lumped together. If I end up doing, I think I've done 8 or 9 poet plays. If I end up doing 2 or 3 dozen poet plays over the years, she'll be one of them, and she should be read. So.
Gotcha.
It's part advertisement, but also part it's an interesting story, an interesting life that she led. So,
I mean, what was the impetus for that?
I know of her work. I knew she had
Gotcha.
a fairly
Yeah.
interesting life, and who else is going to do it but me?
No, well, that's the main. I don't think anybody's going to be writing these plays except
I
Dan
did
Schneider.
one also. I did one also about Sister Miriam, the nun. I forget her real
Oh,
name. Yeah. I did a play on her too. She had an interesting life. I even wrote to her order and said, here's a poem I wrote. I never heard back from the nuns.
oh, of course. Yeah. Well, they're not the biggest literary fans.
I happen to notice that Noreen Neidecker had a relationship, I don't think it was romantic, or a friendship with Basil Bunting. I've never had a chance to ask you about Bunting and Brig Flats. Do you have any thoughts on
I read Brig Flats, and I know Bunting. From what I remember, he's not a great poet. He's not a bad poet. He's someone in the middle. I would say there are poets like Mark Van Doren who I think could have been great poets, but they ended up just being very good to excellent poets because they never spent as much time and they never pushed themselves in their poems. It's been years since I read Bunting. He reminds me of Mark Van Doren, although not quite as good.
Now, with poets like that, I mean, do you think that's like something they should be castigated for? Like, if you don't live up to your expectation, or is it okay to be like a very good poet and you also like to, jet ski a lot?
Yeah, this is very apropos because I've had a number of people, young people, on my list who've come and gone, who have talent and need to work on it. There's a handful that are still on my list that I've always said they need to engage more. A couple of them. One guy named Ezekiel Yu. There's another guy named Chin who lives in Singapore. Joel Parrish, who did the film with Alex Sherrimet, and 1 or 2 other people. And then there are some poets who have made a bit more. Who have gotten a bit better over the years. Laura Woods, I'm hoping to talk to her. She's been on a few Alex shows talking about various films and poems and whatnot. She has a lot of potential. But again, it's one of those things. She's going to be getting married. I think she's moving to Canada next year, and she's going to have to work, and she's going to have to work 40, 50 hours doing whatever until she can, whatever her life plan is. And this is what derails people. This is why when I say I mean I've spent my life working in what you could call brain dead jobs simply because I knew that if I put my mind to it, there's no one that's ever going to have a corpus like me. And I think I might be the last fully human writer in terms of a corpus because there's going to be people are going to take the easy way out with AI as it gets a bit better. It might take another 10 or 20 years before it's competent and solid and can help you. But people are going to be cheating, mixing AI. And you can mix AI stuff with your own writing stuff as long as you delineate that and are honest about that. But if you're having an AI write 80% of your novel, it's not really your novel.
It's very true, Mr. Schneider. I think we'll have to set up another meeting the next couple months.
Yeah.
I'll reach out.
Obviously, I appreciate your interest. I appreciate your intelligence, and it's always good to talk. So anytime you want to talk, and off camera too, if you ever have any personal issues, want to talk, I'm always open to listen, and I appreciate the time you spent to listen to me. So if I can give something back to ever help you artistically or personally, just let me know.
Much appreciated, sir.
All right.